Why does Steven Spielberg avoid using wide-angle apertures in his films? Why would he skip that cool, blurry background look? Stick around, because we're about to explore how and why his choice helps him tell such amazing stories. Spielberg is a visually strong director. This means he decides the frame and focal length, not the cinematographer. It's well known he storyboards his shots. Early on in his career, he preferred to look at his storyboards over the script on location. He was a prodigy. Right from his first movie, Duel, he had access to Panavision equipment. He had the best lenses and never looked back. He used super speeds for widescreen and C-series lenses for anamorphic. Here's the thing, super speeds open up to T1.3 and C-series lenses are anamorphic lenses and they open up to T2.8. I've published a full list of lenses he used on his films as well as the formats. Check the link in the description to see it. Bottom line, Spielberg could have filmed his movies with a wide open aperture. He chose not to. Why is that? The first clue is that Spielberg preferred to use wide-angle lenses. Before we get into that, a quick shout out to our sponsor Smooth Camera Gear. If you're looking for a reliable, high-quality tripod to enhance your filmmaking, check out the SCG Steadifast tripod. It's got a 30-day money-back guarantee and a 3-year warranty. Click the link in the description and use the promo code on screen for an exclusive discount. Spielberg's frames are some of the most dynamic you'll ever find. What do I mean by that? Characters are different sizes in the same frame. They exit the frame and pop into the frame in visually stimulating ways. He's able to take us from a long shot to a tight close-up in one camera move, and the face looms over us like a mountain. How does he achieve this? He uses wide-angle lenses. Wide-angle lenses distort objects and make everything look hyper three-dimensional. When something goes slowly by, it looks faster with a wide-angle lens. The trick was used in the sequence in The Mines and the Temple of Doom and countless other films. Many have said Spielberg sees the world in 21mm on a Super 35mm frame. He uses whatever focal length works, of course, but on the whole, he's a wide-angle lens filmmaker. Let's assume he uses a 21mm focal length. Early in his career, he filmed on widescreen 1.85:1 and anamorphic. Anamorphic is a different beast, so I'll stick to widescreen just for this comparison. At T1.3, he would get a depth of field of about a foot at a distance of 6 feet. And if he decided to film a close-up at about 2 feet, the depth of field would reduce to less than 2 inches. This wouldn't do for him. Spielberg is all about detail. He likes to keep everything in the scene sharp and clear, from the front to the back. This is called depth of field. If the background is blurry, that's shallow depth of field. But if everything is equally sharp, that's a deep depth of field. Spielberg loves his deep focus because he wants every part of the frame to contribute to the story. Even with a 21mm lens, shooting wide open would result in a shallow depth of field, which means you wouldn't be able to spot all the little details, the impact of the location, or a funny background moment. His films are not just about the main action, but also about all the rich details that make his cinema feel expensive. It's like getting to see the whole picture, not just part of it. The depth of field has other practical side effects too, as in camera blocking. Blocking is how a director stages and moves his actors around in a scene. Spielberg wants to keep all the actors in focus, even if they're moving around. A shallow depth of field would make it difficult to keep all the important elements in focus. Spielberg's careful blocking ensures that each character's movement contributes to the impact of that shot. No one moves about randomly. Probably the greatest blocking of extras you'll see is in Schindler's List. These shots were too personal to be treated as just another crowd scene. Spielberg is super careful with how he sets this up, making sure you can see everyone clearly to understand what's happening. Even in a film without extras like Duel, the landscape, the heat, and the road are always present. Using a smaller aperture allows Spielberg to capture the entire vista in sharp focus. He does that even with his tentpole blockbusters like Jurassic Park. Why blur the background when it can contribute to the impact of the foreground? Spielberg is a master at creating a realistic environment. When you're watching a Spielberg movie, you're really getting your money's worth. You might have a question, why not rack focus from one point to another? Spielberg maintains focus on multiple planes so our eyes can watch whatever we want and take in everything together, consciously or subconsciously. Given his preference for long takes and dynamic camera movements, shooting at smaller apertures reduces the need for constant focus adjustments. Imagine seeing the focus change multiple times in one shot. It's just too distracting. As a side benefit, Spielberg's choice to avoid wide-open apertures simplifies the focus puller's job. Maintaining focus at t1.3 is challenging today, with focus aids and monitors. Imagine in the 70s or 80s, but there were no monitors for the focus puller. He or she had to use tape and years of instinct and wisdom to pull focus. And you wouldn't know you made a mistake until you saw the dailies late that day or some other day. By then, it might be too late. Having deep focus also helps with continuity. Spielberg's movies used to have tons of action sequences. The dialogue scenes would match the action scenes in visual audacity. You didn't have to force shallow depth of field on some shots to save time and then change the visual language for wide shots or action scenes. This decision actually plays into the strengths of a lens. Typically, the sweet spot of a lens, aperture-wise, is about 2 stops from its widest aperture. So if the Panavision or Zeiss Super Speeds opened up to a t1.3, you really would get the best performance at about t2.8. On many of his Indiana Jones films, the stop was more like t5.6 or t8. Notice how sharp Spielberg's movies are as a whole. That's because the lens is stopped down and not wide open. Back in the days of film with low ASA ratings, they would have loved to film wide open to save money in lighting. You had tungsten and halogen fixtures mostly, no HMIs or LED lights. It got very hot at high wattages, and it drew a lot of power. Yet, Spielberg went against the grain. He had more lighting firepower than necessary because he needed deep focus. In E.T. the Extraterrestrial, they filmed at no wider than t2.5, and the lights were just about adequate. He was filming in 4perf widescreen 1.85:1, which in simple language means he used the full area available on the film frame. This was critical for visual effects work because the images had to be exposed correctly and be clean. In E.T., they didn't push or pull the film. That means they barely changed exposure later during the processing stage. Spielberg is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest film director when it comes to camera movement. His camera moves are not only smooth but extremely complex. There's a flair to them that can't be described or copied. A smaller aperture just adds to the immersion of the story. This is a lot more important than it looks like at first glance. Spielberg moves the camera on all 3 axes. On a roving camera such as his, if he used shallow depth of field, the plane of focus, or in other words, the blurriness, would be moving all over the place. It would distract too much from what's happening story-wise. In his long career, Spielberg has shot on 3 major formats: widescreen 1.85:1, anamorphic, and super 35mm 1.85:1. For The Fabelmans, Spielberg's own story of becoming a director, he picked super 35 1.85:1 with Panavision Primo and P Vintage lenses. P Vintage is based on older Panavision Ultra Speeds with better housing and construction. This is his favorite format, and he only shot anamorphic on projects that weren't personal. Why? I think one reason why anamorphic is not his preferred format is probably because it causes even more shallow depth of field at similar apertures. In my experimental short film Man Made Love, I used Arri Master anamorphics shot at t8 to get deep focus. It was really hard and stretched my tiny budget too thin. Spielberg has a lot more money and light, but it's still harder in anamorphic than spherical. He wanted to tell stories how he saw it. He saw it in wide-angle 1.85:1 when he started, and that's how he continues to see the world. This is what gives his work a unique character. If you've seen Spielberg's films over the years, you can recognize his work if you happen to catch it midway. While many directors have created a look that is synonymous with their name, very few have used camera movement and blocking as their signature, and none have come close. Spielberg is like the Shakespeare of camera movement and blocking. So to answer the question, why did Steven Spielberg avoid wide open apertures and shallow depth of field? Because it would have destroyed everything that makes his films unique and interesting. It's as simple as that. I've camera blocked this next video for you, and it's in focus. Click on it.